for joining us in today's webinar on Recruiter as a Marketeer Paradigm Shift. I'm Purva from People Matters, and before we begin with today's webinar, I would like to give you a brief on Talent Branding Week 2015. In today's dynamic economy, 83% of the employers believe that their brand has a significant impact on hiring great talent, but only 33% of them regularly measure it. That leaves us with the following questions. How are organizations enhancing their attractiveness as employers? Recruiter as a marketer, why this emphasis and why now? How can we enhance the journey of a candidate with talent branding? What are the visible business impacts that the talent brand will have on the recruitment process? In this webinar, you will get to know that with growing numbers of job applicants, robust and thorough selection is supreme. The emphasis is on having a highly efficient talent management process in place. There's a new genre of recruiters evolving, recruiters who need to be tech-savvy, socially aware, and prepared to learn new skills that better meet the requirements. This webinar will focus on these roles and a lot more. We have the privilege of having with us Namrata Gill, Vice President HR from Dr. Reddy's Laboratories. She has a vast experience of HR strategy, shared services, organizational design, structures, talent management, employer branding, and many more. Her previous stints include diverse roles at Mahindra & Mahindra, Philips, and ITC Infotech. Our partner for today's webinar for helping us making this program possible is LinkedIn. Founded in 2003, LinkedIn connects the world's professionals to make them more productive and successful. With more than 347 million members worldwide, including executives from every Fortune 500 company, LinkedIn is the world's largest professional network on the internet. The company has a diversified business model with revenue coming from talent solutions, marketing solutions, and premium subscription products. Headquartered in Silicon Valley, LinkedIn has offices across the globe. We have saved time for you to ask your questions at the end of the webinar. For those watching the live webinars, you can submit questions at any time during the presentation through the question and answer section. We will try to respond to as many questions as time allows. We have a full exciting agenda for the webinar today, so without any further delay, I'm going to hand over the webinar microphone to Namrata. Over to you, Namrata.
Thank you, Purva. Purva, is the audio clear to you?
Yes, absolutely, Namrata.
Okay, great. So I would like to start. Good afternoon, everybody. I think it's a very bad idea to keep the webinar in the afternoon just after lunch, but I didn't make the decision, so you can't blame me about it. Thank you, People Matters, for inviting me, and thank you, LinkedIn. I am the most avid LinkedIn user, so as I get up before I see my mails, I check in LinkedIn. So that is the importance of a social media and something as powerful as LinkedIn in our lives. Now, coming back to the topic, is recruiter also a marketeer? When I say marketeer, I'm also talking mostly about branding, advertisement, positioning, pricing, but I'm also talking about a lot other things. For example, I'm also talking about increasing sales, finding revenue and other things. So when I start the slides, I want to talk a little bit about employer branding. What is a brand, right? When I go to the market and when I want to buy a running shoes, I go to a Nike store and purchase. They're very expensive, but I still pay for them because for brand, you pay a premium. So the brand people purchase, as we see it, it is the external part of it. How people experience the brand is a customer value proposition, and how individuals experience the brand, the employees inside, is the employee value proposition. I have seen recruitment is the most important and highest business impact process in HR. Having said that, the employee value proposition has two sides. The experience you give to an employee and the experience the employee receives from you. Now, coming back to employee value proposition and the brand. Branding is a science and is mostly held forte by the marketing department. And if you have ever done recruitment, you know how much we pay the marketing guys a higher premium because they are doing branding. I think it's time that recruitment people start charging the premium as well. So remember, the customer value proposition is for the external world and employee value proposition is for employees, including the ones we are going to hire either from campuses or externally. The building blocks of a customer acquisition and the talent acquisition process are the same. There's a pre-sales phase where we do manpower forecasting. You all would have heard of strategic workforce planning. There's a branding that we do, the campaigning. Remember the newspaper campaigns, the walk-ins, and there's a referrals that we do. The selection process is about interview and touch points. For example, if you were selling a car, somebody would touch and feel your car, go to a dealer, have a car. Similarly, selection process is all the touch points. Then we develop our sales manpower. Similarly, we develop our interviews. And all of you and your own roles would be developing your competency-based interviewing skills. Yeah, I know most of the managers don't want to attend, but we force them. I know that part also because I'm on this side. The interview process is the moment of truth, as is the customer interaction. And then we manage the transaction, which is really fit the compensation, which is the most difficult discussion. And I think recruitment guys and talent acquisition people do it really well. Post-selection, we need to give a feedback. And there's also an analytics that we need to do. Good sales organizations are talking of talent analytics. And I think good recruitment organizations and HR organizations are also talking about talent analytics. There are two parts of talent analytics. I think I love the way LinkedIn gives us analytics. The second analytics is something, HR analytics and talent analytics is something that I read by Josh Bersin, mostly on Puddles on LinkedIn. So that part of analytics is something, what matters and what are we going to do. For example, I'm just citing an example. For example, we try to hire people laterally from the best companies. Does it make a difference in the quality of hiring? If we were to do analytics well, we'll know people from south of India of the age 25 to 30 perform the best if they are a postgraduate. So that kind of analytics which helps us to predict and come back with predictive models. Moving on. How does recruitment look from an HR lens? When we go to recruit, do we even talk about the employee value proposition? No. We have the same recruitment principles, maybe for very senior levels because there's sensitivities involved. It differs a lot, but the recruitment principles are almost the same. So we do one size fits all. Even our branding, even if you see today, we don't do enough on social media. If you were to ask the potential in social media, let's, for example, take LinkedIn here, since we have been talking about it, is immense. To me, I'm very clear that the exploitation of the potential is only 10%, which is ridiculous. And we focus on delivering in time. So we get applauded for fast recruitment. Nobody says that, hey, I'll recruit a quality, but maybe I'll take a day more. Nobody applauds that person. While if I was heading a marketing department, I would go to customer with a clear value proposition. I will also have segmented communication. For example, if I'm selling, again taking an example of a car, to a youth, my communication would be different. If I was selling to a married, my communication would be different. But we position employer brand the same way. We don't target different segments of employer brand to different target population. Social media presence is very ad hoc. Nobody has an integrated social media strategy which is aligned with the segmentation and employer brand. And data analytics, and I don't know why, I get extremely annoyed when people use analytics in such a loose form. There's data, there's information, and there's knowledge. Knowledge is what analytics is. And I think it's become very fashionable in HR to call data as analytics without getting information about it. Then what about interview experience? Is it delightful? Just because what kind of interview innovations have we done? Look at marketing. Where is the marketing taking the world? It's high time HR becomes marketing and recruitment becomes as important marketing science as consumer insights or any other science has been. I want to spend a little time about employee value proposition and what it means. This is a CLC framework which we've used. There are 5 pillars of employee value proposition. First is employee value proposition has to be authentic. You can't have a nice slogan and not live it. Second part is employee value proposition has to be experienced by the employees, which really means that we need to sit down, talk about it, and candidates need to experience it, or the employees need to experience it. It's not a slogan on the wall. For example, let's take an opportunity and say that we give learning opportunities, but in general, we don't even have a postgraduate program or a PhD program which we can sponsor our people to. So it doesn't appear authentic. So the set of attributes that market, which means the potential candidates and employees, see as value. For example, international assignment is a value. So if that is a value for your prospective clients, if going to US and sitting down in California with a mug of beer is a value that your potential candidate has, then your employee value proposition should talk about it. Somewhere we miss out in what a candidate wants when we start defining our employee value proposition. And this is a science that marketing has got it absolutely right. If you are selling Coke, you will know that what Coke stands for, or a Pepsi stands for, or even something, what is the attributes of a Surf versus Ariel. Or if you were to buy Airtel, is it cooling, a cooler phone, or Idea, does it have a best network? So one of the things I always say that if you employ a brand doesn't match the customer brand, customer will feel inauthentic. So it's very important to live EVP. I want to talk a little bit about EVP Square. EVP Square has 4 components: financial and rewards, future growth, feeling and emotional elements, and organization support. Now, when a recruiter or a recruitment or a talent acquisition guy wants to talk to a candidate, he talks of competitive salary on the uppermost and recognition as well, and other benefits. So basically benefits. However, where people feel the importance is the growth opportunities. For example, how much growth will I get in the new organization? What is the career framework? How do I develop in my career? Is there a chance of me being a successor to somebody in the organization? That is something. Second is emotional elements, and these we have seen have become extremely big as the time goes on. And I like to take a pause here and talk about organizations which are ethical, organizations which have great value system. They drive the candidates. So you do not want to join, and ask yourself, be honest to your hearts, and ask yourself, would you want to join an organization that doesn't drive the value system or ethics? This has become more and more important in the choices people are making, especially the young generation. Then it's about flexible work environment. Gone are the days when, it was only a need that women felt. If I were to give flexibility in my team, I'm sure the guys want it as much as the women in the team. The supportive management, so that if I have a personal problem, I know. And there's an empowerment in the system, which means that empowerment is not in the paper only, but it's actually in a spirit. I feel like going out and doing job, and I don't have to take an approval for every smallest thing possible. So these are the EVP Square elements that we talk about. Now, these elements need to comprise what we call as an EVP. And the process of coming to an EVP on how do you define your brand or an employer brand from a recruitment perspective, first element is you collect all the data that you have, your engagement drivers, your strengths and weaknesses in an organization, your employee's voice, the voice of campus people, what are they saying, what are and if you're using a recruitment partners or shared services, you need to listen to their voice. So you collect all the data, then do an insight and identify the EVP elements. Let's say, for example, I'm just saying, we are talking of great learning opportunities comes across as one element. Empowerment comes as the second element. And third element could be anything about fairness. Now, when you come to these elements, the chances are that some of the elements would be your strengths, which you're already doing. Some of them will be aspirational, what you really want to do. So after you have done that, then you go back and select those elements. Out of those 10, 12 elements, you test them on the basis of their attractiveness, how attractive they are for a future employee, how attractive they are for your current employee. So let's say great learning is very attractive. Then we test them based on the believability. How many people believe that my organization will actually deliver on those statements? So you do first test, which is based on attractiveness. Second test could be done on the basis of believability. And the third test, which is the most important test, is to be done on management's ability to deliver. You can ask for the moon, but if you think your management will not deliver, please don't put it in your brand statement. So basically what we are talking about is 3-part testing. First, attractiveness, something will get eliminated. Let's say out of 12, you leave with 10. Out of 10, then you filter it on believability. After you filter it on believability, then you filter it on management's ability to deliver. So you test it in a controlled group. This testing could be done with your employees and few intenders and few partners. Let's say about a sample of 100 people if your organization size is 10,000. So we are talking of 1% controlled group testing. This is extremely important so that you come at the EVP elements. So once you know what your brand stands for, now it's very important not to copy anybody's brand, but to make an authentic living brand for yourself. Once you know what your brand really stands for and what your brand is trying to say, you start branding it. And this part is extremely important, but it cannot be done before you actually define it in a way which is aspirational, believable, attractive, and is authentic in management's ability to deliver. I'm sorry I'm repeating myself, but this is extremely good attribute to have. I want to take about few examples of some employer brands. Mahindra, as we know, has started a program called AQ, which is an auto quotient, which means that if you are an auto enthusiast, Mahindra is the place for you. So it not only tried to lift the auto brand internally, but they went to NDTV, partnered with them to do a quiz. They went to engineering colleges, they went to management schools, they went laterally. So anybody who was interested in automobiles could find a place here. So they did a lot of branding around it and they sustained it. Now, most important part of branding is sustaining it. Sustaining it is extremely important than growing branding. So this one we are talking about is sustained for over 5 years. It requires money, it requires resources, it requires management capability to believe, and it requires many other things, which are important. So don't start a brand till you get convinced that you can do it. Similarly, Mahindra, I think, had done War Room in the B School, which it's sustaining years after years. Second part of my story is talking about segmented communication. Why do we communicate same thing to everybody, to a person who's 20-year-old, to a person who's 50-year-old, to a person who's a scientist, to a person who's in sales, to a person who's in manufacturing? Why? The experienced hire and the fresher require different communication. And as Sapient did it, Sapient tried to talk to experienced people about experienced hires, about career opportunities, training, and mentoring. While freshers were more interested in traveling overseas and what about the external client intervention. So you have to know, you have to figure out which makes anybody tick. Once you figure out what segment ticks with what, whether it's women, and again segmentize it between bands, between gender, so what works for me does not work for anybody else. So I think it's a lot of work, but it's worth the work the moment you start segmentizing your communication. I want to talk about social media, and I want to talk about what are companies today facing. They face some job openings. They're talking about achievement of employees. The recognition today, I feel really good if somebody recognizes me on LinkedIn as a recommendation rather than just recognizing me in the office. So even my friends know about it. We are talking of leadership talk. We are talking of testimonials, job fairs, vacancies, and competitions. So this is what is happening today in the world. But is it enough? I think no. Because we need to become truly engaging. What is your best social media tool where you need to engage with? Capture that imagination. How about co-creating a policy? Let's say you're coming up with the green policy of sustainability. Why don't you create the policy with your employees and, let's say, external people? What's wrong with that? And you also engage your passive candidates through LinkedIn. I think it's a great way to engage them and come back with it. Social media strategy needs to be integrated with your campus program, recruitment program, the employer branding program, and the employee engagement program. Today, we see it as a very different phases, and we are not able to leverage or get full value about all of them. I think there's a lot of potential in social media, potential in integrating them, potential in using LinkedIn even to its full potential, which we don't do. I think we don't research enough. I'm guilty myself, so we don't research enough to do that. More importantly, social media, you could also leverage social media to make brands for yourself, for the people around you, for leaders in the organization. And I think they're great examples how people are able to do it. If you just see, let's say, how even today, when I was seeing the Pulse today, even Narendra Modi is on LinkedIn. So I think there's a need which has been felt by the Prime Minister of the country. It's high time all of us feel it too. This HCL started the coolest interview ever. After each candidate had given an interview, they started collecting the feedback through social media. I thought it was a great way to do it. I think the second thing that we need to do is how to take interviewing experience to the next level. We all focus on it. We all see the right questions. We all want the right answers. We talk about all competencies and everything. Somewhere we don't focus on experience of a candidate. I think there's a lot of things that we can talk to do, not how we interview. We are so focused on getting our results right. Let's be honest here. If I am a recruitment specialist or a talent acquisition specialist, what do I focus on? Closure to the position. I just want to, and I'm nice to the candidate. It doesn't mean I'm actually focusing on the experience of the candidate. These are two very different things. And the more we pay attention to them, the more they will come alive. I think Nike did this Just Do It campaign. They found this senior most leader, and senior most leader actually interviewed the prospective talent. They actually branded their whole pre and post interview through Do It Yourself, Just Do It e-learning kits. One of the things that we need to take to the next level is quality of hire, and I want to talk about it because if you want to be a good marketeer or a recruitment specialist, it's not about just doing it right, branding it, but also focusing on not the time parameter, but the quality parameter. For example, we could define a set of input parameters that make it to the recruitment experience. Let's say it could be sources, companies, age profile, experience, and some output parameters. Let's talk of performance of the candidate, potential of the candidate after he's joined in, he or she has joined in, potential performance of the candidate, the retention, and manager's experience. Now, what we need to do if we need to become the best-in-class talent specialist, we have to correlate over the years the input parameters with the output parameters and see where there's most significant correlation and focus on that part. Because doing it till here will only take us to some place, but it's very important to focus on the quality of the hiring that we do, not just completing the hiring, and the hiring manager liking the candidate. I want to take a pause here. I want to talk about the organizations that I work in. I want to share a few experiences that are there. They are by no means complete, but there's something very significant which will help you and me understand it better. I will just talk more. I know webinar is like not a very good two-way thing, but I like to talk about 5 to 10 minutes more, and then I like to start with the questions that you may have. I think one of the things that we do is that marketing approach is very important to us because we hire some niche skills. Let's say injectables is a niche skill, and what kind of injectables we need is a niche skill. So how do we position ourselves not to have the best-in-class talent in India but globally? And that you cannot do it without going in a digital thing, without taking the help of something like a LinkedIn, or without having a clear-cut strategy. Second part is that we are growing. So we are growing in Ukraine, we are growing in Russia, we are growing in many other geographies. We are talking of Japan, Australia. So now when we are growing in those geographies, how do you make sure the best-in-class talent joins you? And how do you make sure even something as wherever we go, because we are a pharma company, we have legal requirements. Let's say we need to hire the good legal expert. How do we do the best quality of hire? And how do we make sure they join us? There's no rocket science here, but if we are not a good employer brand globally, right? How is it that we will position ourselves? How is it that we will go around and position ourselves anywhere? So we need to build a consistent global brand and have a segmented approach to communication. It's easier said than done. It's very easy for me to sit here, give a webinar, but it's very difficult for me to actually come down and do the brass tacks, especially when the rubber hits the road in a country like, let's say, Ukraine, which I don't know the language. How do we go about and do it? So what we are doing, we have defined our employer value proposition. That's the first building block that we have with us. So we have defined our employer value proposition. After that, we start building a brand, which is the employer branding. For this, the approach that we even have in engineering colleges would be different from the approach we have in management, would be different from the approach we have globally, would be different the way we go higher lateral. It means a lot of work, yes. But in the sense, this is a long-term work. It is not a short-term closure. Building a brand is not a short-term science. For example, when I say Toyota stands for quality, somewhere the consistent message in the people they hire has gone in the system that Toyota stands for quality. We have leadership competencies. We have a dictionary of leadership competencies. The difference is we see which competency is applicable for which role. It's not a blanket leadership competencies that apply to all roles. We prioritize because the whole thing is making it so simple so that people want to use it and people go to it. We try to enrich candidate experience by touching the touch points in a better way. It's still work in progress. Have we attained nirvana here? No. Should we be attaining nirvana at some point of time? Yes. It's a good direction to go. I love the last piece, which is on analytics. I think there's a lot of science in the social media. LinkedIn does a lot of analytics, but even building on those analytics and how to leverage those analytics for your advantage is another science. I think we need to be cognizant of this and we need to constantly drive it. You need to have a good statistics understanding. Without it, the analytics is useless. And you will need to know you have so much data points on your hand. How do you capture it? How do you take it forward? That is the most important thing that I've seen. We thought that automation helped us in a big way. We can now get all the data and all the reports at fingertips. We are able to identify target organizations, target campuses. Which medium of sourcing works for that? We have created something called as a sourcing index, wherein we give marks to different CVs that have been sourced. What is the percentage of experience from the source it's coming, etc. And eventually, we are talking about improving the quality of hire in the organization. As I said earlier, it's a work in progress. Have we mastered the perfect art of quality of hire? No. But what quality of hire from campus has different parameters than it has elsewhere. So there's a lot of segmentation that we need to do. It's almost like, like we get the news that we want to see in LinkedIn or in any other social media, customized to us. So it has to get more customized. I think I want to talk a little bit about our EVP. Our EVP has 4 elements: exceptional learning opportunities, faster career growth for high performers, professional freedom to create an impact, and let's make world a healthier place. And our brand being good health can't wait. How do we communicate through? Of course, our website is there, job posting is there, there's a content in messaging, there's a social media activities. Have we mastered the art? No. Are we getting better? Little bit by bit. Should we have been gotten better before? Of course. But I think once you get your basics right, that which tool to use for which thing and how to communicate and how to segment on the tool is something that we would want to keep talking about as we go along. So I think the most important part of our branding, which happens through campus and university relation, is one of the things you could also possibly do is baseline your campuses through a survey, perhaps AC Nielsen or somebody runs it for us, or anybody you want to go through. Get the results, see where you stand on campus. It's not a day 0 or day 1 that defines you. It's how you are perceived as an employer. And once you get that done, then you need to focus on the targeted employer branding rather than going full hog over it. That will give you enough comfort to do it. So I think that is all I had to say. Purva, over to you. I would like to spend next 20-25 minutes in answering few questions if people have any. And also just stressing the part that the role of a recruiter is no longer about, or a talent acquisition head is no longer about closing position. Closing positions is a given. I think how you become employer brand, how you communicate employer brand, that is first part. And the second part about this is that how do you not only communicate employer brand but also enhance the quality of people you are hiring through consistent efforts of building your employer brand. And I think it is little more tougher than a marketing role, though marketing guys will not agree with me, because you also dealing with pressures of changing job market, and there's too many segmentation happening here. So these are few of my initial thoughts. I'm ready to take any questions, any feedback, any thoughts, any suggestions that any one of you have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Namrata. We do have a couple of questions here with us, but that was indeed very, very insightful. So the first question that we have is from Sarang Brahme. So he's asking, how do you measure employer branding results, metrics or return on investment?
Okay. So I think it's a very good question. Thank you for asking this. I think there are 2 parts to measuring employer brand. So how you live your employer brand internally would be your engagement that you have. And how you live your external brand could be done through 1 or 2 means. The first is, if you were to go to LinkedIn, LinkedIn would give you an employer brand index, which is the easiest way to do it. The second way is also, there are other social media tools like Radian and German 6, which actually give you unstructured data and making a structure out of it on the social media. That is the second. Third is, it's good to externally benchmark yourself with the like companies, and you could participate in 1 or 2 of the, whether it's a great place to work survey, or you could also do a survey like Aon Hewitt. There are different surveys, and different surveys have different users. The last one being, which I think is very powerful, is actually go to an external party like an AC Nielsen, participate in the campus survey in case you're going to campus, and that will give you on different parameters a very good report on how your employer brand is perceived. Once you get that, then you can start working on the building blocks of your employer brand. These are some of the ways that I suggest. internally, you want to measure your EVP. Your EVP is an outcome of your way of engaging people. So your engagement survey, which is customized to your EVP, will tell you how you're living the external brand. Remember here, you will be tempted to go to a Gallup or a Hewitt or somebody like that for an employee engagement survey, but it doesn't serve a purpose. What you need to do is you need to be very sure that the engagement survey that you're doing in your offices is actually customized to your EVP model. Purva, does that answer your question?
Absolutely, Namrata. So we have a next question that's from Nupur, and she would like to know more about recruitment analytics and what are the parameters being measured and how often do you measure? So she wants to know if you use any tool for the same.
Sorry, recruitment analytics. So I think first of the things is you need to measure everything in recruitment, lead time, everything that you need to measure. But most important thing is you need to measure quality of hire. Quality of hire has two parameters. One is a lead indicator, which could be the channels that you get the quality of hire. But remember, all lead indicators are not useful. For example, in one of the organizations where I work, I found out it doesn't matter from which kind of company I hire people. Their performance stays the same. It has no correlation. So you need to have input parameters and you need to sit down and correlate it with performance. For example, for last 2 years, what you could do is for last 2 years, take your recruitment data. Let's say you hired 100 people. What is the performance of those 100 people? Do it for 2 years because in 1 year you don't know the level of performance. What is the potential of those 2 people? What is the retention percentage of those 2 people? Once you do that, and then you see that which parameter, let's say if people joined us from a company which is big, stay with us longer, perform better, then you need to put the feedback into the system and draw a predictive model which can predict for you that what kind of people from what kind of colleges, what kind of regions, what kind of age group, what kind of experience, and what kind of, whether they're referrals or non-referrals, actually stay with you longer. And try to do more of the right thing. The problem is we do anecdotal. We don't do any empirical thing. We actually go anecdotal. Oh, people from, let's say, Hyderabad don't stay with us. Really? Did you even test it out? So those are the things that are extremely important. The analytics of recruitment have to be linked to other HR processes, especially performance management and talent management. Which of the people you hired are high potentials? If none of the people in 3 years you hired are high potentials, then maybe you're not doing the right thing. So this is extremely important, and this is how you need to do it. So Purva, I think I just answered. Is that good enough? Could you check?
Absolutely. So Namrata, we have another question here with us. That's quite interesting. So Parvati wants to know that how do you measure your new joiner experience?
So I think new joiner experience has to be measured in the typical way to do it is you do a 30 days feedback. We can call it, let's say, the first joiner's impression or first impressions, 60 days and 100 days. You need to have a survey with a set of questions which are validity and reliability tested, which you do for the new joinees. And now what happens is the flip side is survey always gets socially desirable answers, right? So what we insist doing is we insist doing 2 meetings with a non-hiring manager but some other manager, and especially, see, you need to do a diagnose. Diagnose always doesn't mean a survey. The main thing is that as HR people, we are so ingrained in thinking that diagnosis means a survey. It doesn't always. So we need to do a diagnose, but most important diagnose is between 60 and 100 days, and that is when most of the people leave us. So that is when you need to do that so that you get early disengagement signs. Second thing is you should give a manager a early disengagement signs monitor or a kind of checklist that do you think your employee is getting disengaged? So these are few things that you should do in getting new joiners experience. Second thing, when you do it, employee engagement or any survey, put the cut of people who are less than 100 days in a separate thing. If the engagement levels are less than the engagement levels that we have in the organization, you would know that something is absolutely not quite right. Yeah? So I think.
Thank you so much, Namrata. So the next question that we have is from Mugdha, and she wants to know if you could explain a little about the sourcing index concept in detail. So this was the one that you mentioned, recruitment analytics.
Yeah, exactly. So I think sourcing index is you have to define when CVs come to you, right? You say reject or accept it, and then you pass it on to the hiring manager. There's a need to do something in between, which is create a sourcing index depending on the profile and the segment of the position. Let's say you're hiring a manager in HR. Now you would say an HR manager kind of company he's worked in 20% weightage. If the company is in this list, he gets this percentage. Then you say that the manager, let's say for an HR person, the psychometric test has 10% weightage. His academic records have 5% weightage. This way you need to define a weightage for sourcing for each position. Normally, sourcing in companies is either outsourced or done by junior level recruiters. So what needs to be done is they need to be explained, and they can't outrightly reject a person. They need to put a number. When you have people ranging from 80 to let's say 20%. You pick up whichever you think is the right. But the idea is that sourcing index has to be defined right in the beginning for each level or each role as you want to do it, so that you know what is more important in the role. Let's say for the HR manager, I think the experience in recruitment is the most important. So I will put 10% weightage on recruitment experience. So you have a guideline for person who is going through 1,000 CVs and trying to filter it out, so that you know you're not making a difference. Otherwise, it could be just like a keyword search, yes or a no. So it's putting a little bit of a science into recruitment so that we can take it forward. Mugdha, I hope this clears.
Well, yes, thank you, Namrata. So the next one we have is from Rupa, and she says, like you mentioned, we in HR or recruitment focus more on successful closures of the positions. Like in marketing, we talk much about our company or product and what we do. So she wants to know how to really assess what the customer or employee really wants.
So I think we focus on closures, but it's good to do it through. So there are different tools that you need to. For example, if you're hiring, you should actually ideally use a good psychometric tool, and also do a chat on some specific questions which talks to you about what are career anchors for this person. Once you do that, you get an insight. You get a lot of insight into what the person wants and what the person doesn't want. But more than that, I think the science to this is that what an employee wants has to be done through a diagnostics, and what a lateral candidate wants, you need to arrive at this through some scientific methods. For example, we tried using OPQ, which used to give us traits, and we also started doing reference checks on the candidate before even screening the candidate. For example, a set of questions were asked to reference. Now, it may work for some people, it may not work because of the volume of recruitment happening. But I think a little bit of second data to know what a person wants is important. The second thing is, I think you can use social media very attractively. For example, you could go to his LinkedIn profile, check for the recommendation. You could go to other social media things and check what is the social media profile of the person. I think that gives us a lot of insights into a person and what he's been, especially the kind of connections the person has, the kind of articles the person has published, the kind of articles the person likes. So there's a lot of insight in the web floating around a person, not just doing a Google, but going a level deeper, will give us a lot of insight into a person before we hire them. And for our employees, we need to do a segmented approach on what an employee wants. We can't see that one approach works for everybody, but you should do a deep diagnosis, and it should be valid for a period of 2 to 3 years till you need to repeat it. I think it's important. It's as important as almost like figuring out what a child wants at home, which is not always easy to figure out. But I think there's a lot of hard work, but it will be all worth it.
Thank you, Namrata. So the next question that we have is from Nutan, and since you were talking about EVPs, so she wants to know that how do you drive EVP during transformation or downside?
Okay, so as I get the question, and I'm just repeating the question, basically you've arrived at an EVP by different sources. Now the thing is, how would you sit down and drive the EVP in the organization, right? That's the question. So I'm trying to answer the question. Yeah. I think you don't drive the EVP. You make sure that all your HR processes are aligned to EVP. Let's say our EVP is great learning experience. So what is that extra learning experience which Dr. Reddy's is giving, which no other company is giving? So you need to find and add that. And remember, EVP, the first thing we must always remember that EVP doesn't have to be communicated. It has to be experienced. The more you communicate, people will become skeptical. So people have to experience it in the organization. So one of the things that I remember one company does is actually set up an EVP zones, talk to EVP zones like stalls, and talk to people about different offerings in these EVP zones, let's say learning what are the higher courses and all that, so that employee actually comes to these stalls, experiences the offerings physically, and it goes back and saying, oh my God, I did not know my company was offering me so much. So those are the kind of experiences, and those are the kind of things that one could talk about.
So the next one we have is from Priyanka, and she asks that how do we initiate the employer branding exercise internally?
Yeah, so I think it's a very good question. So first of all, the need for employer branding has to be felt. So make sure that all your business leaders feel that we need to have a consistent employer brand. Then you go over, and I explained in this slide, you go over all the engagement data where you have, and then you do a SWOT of your strengths and weaknesses. Don't even do SWOT. Strengths and weaknesses that come out from the engagement survey. Do a couple of focus group discussions with different segment groups of the employee. Do different cuts in the organization and different geographies. Get overall strengths and overall weakness. Then see where the organization is going to be. Let's say for us, if it's a good health can't wait, we have to make sure our employees are healthier, right? So our policies have to be tuned to that. So once you do that, you match it to the overall aspiration of the employee, and then come back with 10 to 15 elements, let's say sentences. Great learning opportunities, some of them which you are doing, which are your strengths. Some of them should be your weaknesses which you want to convert, right? Once you have done these 2 points, then you filter it on attractiveness, believability, and management's capability to deliver. Once you filter that, you will get 5 elements, 5 or 6 sentences, like learning opportunities, empowerment, or quality focus, or whatever you get, right? Once you get that, you need to actually sit down and take it to a higher level, where you will need to wordsmith these, make sure they are catchy, and they look good when you communicate, and they are easy to remember and comprehend by people. So that will become a part of your employer brand or EVP. Then you need to have a communication strategy around it, which should be phased, phase 1, and segmented approach. What will you do for shop floor workers? What would you do for people working in US? What would you do for people working in Russia? All that you'll have to come back and do it. And once you do that, then you need to take it forward. But I think the time is always right. People want to know what you stand for, even when there's a transformation, even when you're downsizing. I think people still want to know. It creates a positive vibe in the organization, which I think is extremely important.
Right. So the next question, Namrata, that we have is from Zen, and he says that what if some of his target audience is not on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is the only tool that they officially use for branding on social media apart from company website. So what best can be done in that situation?
So I think even if your target audience is not on LinkedIn or not on any other social media platform, you need to go out there and hire them. I think we could talk about two target, let's say very senior people or very junior people. I think you need to have a good strategy and good catchment area. You need to study the labor market. You need to study where your target audience is located and do a segmented approach for that geographies and that location. So the approach has to be extremely localized, right? And also, while we believe that LinkedIn or let's say any other social media is not there anywhere, the smartphone penetration is very high. So we may be in for a surprise that we think it is not there. I know that my driver is on LinkedIn. So I think that says a lot about how the world is changing and how the people are coming around. So we before we assume, maybe they're not there, but study the labor market, do a localized strategy rather than making a generic global strategy, and customize your employer brand to that geography and that niche that you're trying to attract. Does it make sense?
Absolutely, Namrata. So everybody is on social media indeed. So the next question that we have is from Jonas, and he says that are there success stories related to influence of social media or employer brand on selection process?
I think there are enough and more success stories limited. I know a lot about how you use social media drives the success story. There's a lot of good examples how Dell did it or how other companies do it. But I think your success story has to be customized to you. And I think social media gives us a lot of leeway in customizing the social story to us. I think one of the places where I worked, 90% recruitments were from referrals and 10% were from consultants. And when I left, 60% were referrals, for almost 30 to 35% were from social media. So I think there's a lot of merit in the way these things are going now. And I think there's a good amount of investment that we should do in that. And I think it has to be customized to your need. And the good thing is the companies are very, the companies are very open to customizing it for you and your needs, and they show a value that you can get out of them. So I think the success stories are there. There's a lot of success stories around. I'm refraining from mentioning any particular success story for the confidentiality sake, but I think we can always talk about it one-on-one.
Absolutely, Namrata. So the next question that we have is from Nagesh, and it's a pretty interesting question. So he says that the rejects will always have a negativity against the employer. So how can that be tackled?
Sorry, who will have a negativity?
The people who do not get accepted, the rejects.
Yes. Yeah. So I think I was giving you the HCL thing where they did the coolest interview ever. I think the good thing is you should come out in the open. You know, people write in different medias, but I think you should come out in the open. For example, ask them to post it on your LinkedIn site. How did they feel about the interview? So I think there will be a negativity, but the mere fact that you're asking them their opinion matters a lot. And not everybody is very negative. I think it's good to tackle that because that will give you indeed a brand. You look at how Google does it or how any other company does it. There's a lot of feedback coming their way. And they deal it in the coolest fashion ever. Not taking a feedback is not a good sign. Just because you will get it negative, that doesn't mean you don't take it. You need to take the feedback, understand what the person is saying, understand if there are recruitment biases in the organization and become better. See, person is anyway going to put it in one social media platform or the other, right? You might as well give him an opportunity to vent it out with you which means it will be contained, it will be controlled, and you'll exactly know what to do better. And you are held accountable for it. I think it's worth it.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So we have a couple of more questions, but I think this would be the last one that we'd be taking because we're running
Yes,
out of time.
I have another meeting, yeah.
Yeah. So last question that we have is from Mukarram. So he's asking if there are any strategies to close niche skills on quicker or faster mode apart from long-term or LinkedIn.
Sorry, niche skill on faster, closing the niche skill, yes. So when you do your strategic workforce planning, which means in the beginning of the year, you know which skill you are going to hire, you need to map and put them there even before you are asked to hire. Now, this kind of proactive approach helps you for the niche skills, and you need to actually constantly scout the social media to make sure you know all buzzwords, anything, anywhere that is talked about, you are the most well-informed person. So that is there, but I would warn you in closing faster than closing it better. So try to use the word closing it better rather than closing it faster, because faster is just one part of it. Closing it better is a science. And as a good talent acquisition person, we all must learn to master it.
Right. So I think with this question and answer session, we are going to wrap up today's webinar. And once again, we would like to thank today's webinar partner, LinkedIn. Finally, a very, very special thanks to Namrata, the speaker for this webinar, for her time and invaluable information that she has shared with us today. And I would like to thank everybody in the webinar audience for participating in today's session. That concludes today's webcast. Thank you and have a great evening.
Thank you.